You're listening to Carmair's podcast of Dark Matter with Michael Parker for the weekend of Sunday, March 16th, 2008. In this episode, the topic is The Mysteries of the Crystal Skulls, with special guest Jaap van Etten, the author of The Crystal Skulls, Interacting with a Phenomenon.
Our guest today is Jaap van Etten PhD. He was born and educated in the Netherlands. He received his PhD in biology in Amsterdam, specializing in ecology for the past 17 years. His focus has been on metaphysical ecology. He studies and teaches about human energies, energy earth lines and vortexes, the energies of crystals and crystal skulls, and how these systems interact. And I must say, Jaap is in a place that I love very much and aching to go visit again, Sedona, Arizona. Jaap, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be on it.
I just finished the book. Alicia has read the book, so she'll be posing some questions today as well. And there's a lot of our listeners who will know what crystal skulls are generally. There may be as many or more who do not. So I thought maybe the best place for us to start is your initial first experience with a crystal skull, and then maybe you could start telling us kind of generally what a crystal skull is, and then we'll just branch off from there.
Okay, that's, I think, indeed a good start. You know, I like to share with you that you sit with one crystal skull in front of you. Right now I'm sitting with about 150 crystal skulls in front of me. I thought that would be the most appropriate setting for participating in your show.
Fantastic.
So that will be my stimulants while I'm talking with you. My first crystal skull, that's a very interesting story. I didn't know anything about crystal skulls when I went to the place that I'm now living in called Sedona. And that was in 1994. I remember that I was looking for a certain book, and I was referenced to a woman who turns out to be very much into crystals. And I was a lot into crystals. I loved crystals. I was meditating with them. And she told me that she had a little surprise for me. Asked me to close my eyes, and I was sitting in this chair like a little child with Christmas and waiting for the moment that she apparently was giving me a little surprise. Mm-hmm. Well, she did. I got a huge, heavy, cold thing in my hand, and I started immediately crying. I had no idea what I had in my hand. I had no idea why I was crying, and I was sitting there and feeling, in all honesty, very silly. And I was sitting there for half an hour until I finally opened my eyes and I looked into the face of a crystal skull. And to be really truthful, I didn't like it at all. It was quite a shock. At the same time, realizing that as an adult grown man, you're sitting and sobbing for half an hour with a cold thing in your hand that turns out to be a skull, brings up a question. What are those things that are called crystal skulls? And that was the beginning of my journey. The crystal skull that I had in my hand was not even an ancient one. It was a contemporary skull, which means it has been recently carved, and it was made of clear quartz. Mm-hmm. And it had a tremendous impact on me. And there was no information. I went back to Holland, where I was living still at that time, and with this big question, what are crystal skulls? So the usual thing is you go on the internet and you try to find books. Well, there were no books in Dutch, and it was not so easy at that time to get English books, so there was not much available. Nonetheless, I am pretty persistent. It was the beginning of a journey that lasts until now, and I must say it's a very interesting journey.
Jaap's new book is Crystal Skulls, Interacting with a Phenomenon. I literally just finished reading it about an hour and a half ago, and Alicia, who's here with us, has read it as well. We both enjoyed it a lot. I guess one of the things that blew my mind, I was familiar in an elementary sense about crystal skulls. I guess we have to mention, of course, that for pop culture, a lot of people are going to know about crystal skulls by the end of this summer because it's going to be part of the new Indiana Jones film. But that's not so much what we're going to discuss too much today. But when you started looking into the crystal skulls, and I know that you're going to take us through the various types, and you have classifications for them that are different than the way most people just say ancient, contemporary, old. Kind of take us through that journey, some of the most remarkable things that you first started realizing when you started looking into this.
Well, the first thing that I actually realized was that as soon as I finally got a crystal skull to work with is that there was something different. And it's very easy to say it's because of the shape. The shape of a crystal skull is in generally, unless you really are aware that there is another meaning than just a symbol of death, you're always looking at, a skull, it is symbolizing death, but it's not. It's actually symbolizing consciousness, because it's the skull represents the place where we are processing all our information. And many traditions even believe that all information we ever are talking about, process, is actually stored in the bones. And that the crystalline structure of bones and that of crystals have something in common, and the commonality is it can store information. So the shape in and of itself is already reminding us of the fact that we process all information. I must admit that the first phase that I was working with crystal skulls, I had to come to terms with truly understanding that. It was as if it was blocking my willingness to open. I was always staring at it. My first crystal skull that was standing on my table in the room when I did my healing sessions, and I saw my clients reacting to it. So it was that process of, okay, what do I tell people? At the same time, I was fascinated. At the same time, I was a little bit dumble in it. It was that feeling. There is no scientific explanation why they are different. It is crystal and it has a shape. But it was that feeling that keeps me going. And what I realized pretty soon is that people who are willing to open up for a crystal skull had similar feelings. It was beginning to realize that people who are sensitive picked up from crystal skulls something that I didn't pick up in the same way from a normal crystal. And that was the beginning of my journey, realizing that there was something to it that makes the stories that I was, of course, reading about the legends and the use of people in ancient times, that there must be something to that. So that was for me a key, the willingness to open up for the form that initially was not, for me, the most attractive form, and then willing to feel that it presented something more than just death.
Well, you actually have a book, a chapter in the book, why the skull shape. One of the things also that fascinated me, which I guess is fundamental, and a lot of people would think about immediately, but I didn't until I read your book, is that the fact that the skulls are made in many cases out of this quartz, and we use quartz in cell phones, in watches. I mean, it's an excellent storage material.
It is. It's not only excellent storage material, it also has this interesting quality that scientifically is called piezoelectricity. You put any type of pressure on it and it bounces back, and in that process, it literally generates electricity. And that is the system that has been used in radios in the old days, when we had the crystal radios. But it also means that if we as human beings, through our intent and thoughts, as you know, are also electromagnetic in nature, that it has an effect on quartz crystal as well, and of course it bounces it back. So there is literally an interaction that is measurable in the crystal when we are working with it.
And you actually say that electromagnetism, I guess, in some ways can be exemplified by a crystalline structure.
Yeah, I know that is, some people find it rather challenging when they hear that. They say, well, I'm not sure this is true. But, one of the interesting things is that when we talk about creation, most people will absolutely agree that there are many different frequencies, high-frequency existence, and that consciousness is working on many different levels. And then we talk in general about different dimensions, right? And in this higher dimensions, the frequencies are much higher than in the dimension that we are living. So in order for anything to get a physical form, it has to literally be in a low vibration. And I know most people don't like to realize that we live in a rather low vibrational state, but that's a factual thing. And in that process of going down from higher consciousness, lower and lower, until we go into a physical form, the last step before that is called electromagnetism. And the most pure form that we can think of is a crystal. The crystal is what I always tend to say, a non-corrupted, three-dimensional form of rather pure consciousness. And that is why people are so attracted to it without maybe realizing, and some may very clearly realize it. It is wonderful to interact with it because that helps us literally to purify our own awareness. And that is why they help us to, and some people call that expansion of consciousness. In reality, is becoming more aware of our consciousness.
Well, I was mentioning this to Alicia right before the show started, and I didn't know if I was going to mention this to you or not, but I've got to say, I've read your book over the last couple of days, and it's been a really weird couple of days, man. I've had a very emotional, I don't know if the skulls are reaching out from the pages, if looking at them is what's doing it, but I've had a really intense last couple of days while reading your book.
I'm not surprised. Crystal skulls are part of our collective consciousness. They have been used, as many people believe, because we find crystal skulls in many ancient digs and graves and other places in ruins. And we know that they have been used over a long period of time, which means that apparently the ancient people were very aware of its power. Mm-hmm. And being part of the collective consciousness, as soon as we read something and we resonate with it, meaning that our consciousness somewhere knows about it, we will get emotional reactions. In that sense, what you experience is similar to what I just shared about my first experience. Why would I start crying without knowing, well, my hands must have somewhere known and given it to my consciousness, and I get a reaction because I recognized something on some level without knowing that I was recognizing it. I think something similar has happened with you.
It actually has freaked me out a little bit because, by the way, we're speaking with Jaap van Etten. He is the author of Crystal Skulls Interacting with the Phenomena. And I don't know, as I was reading it, and I literally just finished it a couple hours ago, I just started thinking about the last couple of days, and I've just had this kind of regurgitation of all this weird, emotional, unresolved stuff that's been going on in my head and my heart. And I didn't even really think that until I was driving into the studio today, and then I mentioned that to Alicia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I said, I'm really not surprised. It is one of the reasons why people are really beginning not only to buy them, but to work with them, because they see that they literally help us to, well, as I say, reflect ourselves, help us to see ourselves, help to bring to the surface what has been hidden. There's a saying that we have, don't come in the neighborhood of a crystal skull because you will change. Well, I think that is a very deep truth. I can tell you endless stories of people who have gone through this kind of experiences, but the same is happening with most of our skulls are contemporary, almost all with the exception of two.